Hey guys, welcome back to The Thoughtful Therapist. In person, live. Well, not live. I guess I recorded this, but anyway. I'm Jimmy Slaughter. This is a place for thought and reflection. No therapy, no coaching, just shared thinking. Let's take this one thought at a time. Episode 4. The Wisest Man Who Knew Nothing. Before we begin, I want to say that today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to step into a little bit of philosophy. Not in a textbook way or a lecture hall way, but in the way that philosophy was originally meant to be lived. Way before modern politics, before social media, before psychology even became a discipline, there was a man walking around Athens asking some uncomfortable questions about justice, about virtue, about what it means to live well. Questions that still unsettle us today. Many consider him the starting point of modern Western philosophical thinking. Not really because he built any sort of system, not because he was actually certain of anything, but because he refused to pretend that he understood what he didn't. And the story that made him famous is strangely and hilariously funny. The smartest man in the city. I've always really loved this story about Socrates. So the oracle declared there was no one wiser than him in Athens. And instead of celebrating, Socrates did something very human and pretty ridiculous. He went looking for someone smarter. Now, this account comes through Plato's Apology. His friend, and I apologize, there's going to be some butchering of words in here, but Chaerephon asked the oracle, is there anyone wiser than Socrates? And the answer is no. Socrates is baffled by this. He knows he has no grand expertise, no special knowledge, so he tests the claim. He talks to politicians who claim to know justice. He talks to poets and artists who speak of virtue. He speaks to craftsmen who are skilled in their trade. And what he finds over and over again is that they are competent in really narrow domains, but overconfident outside of them. They think they know, and they really don't. Socrates doesn't conclude he is wiser because he knows more. He actually concludes that he might be wiser because of how much he doesn't know. True wisdom begins at the boundary of what you can honestly claim. Socrates was an interesting guy. He never wrote anything down. Everything we know about him comes through his students. Plato, one of them, takes Socrates' relentless questioning and tries to build something from it. He searches for stable truths behind shifting opinions. He proposes forms, eternal realities behind justice, beauty, and goodness. If we admit how little we know, what must be true beneath the surface? Socratic humility. Socratic humility becomes metaphysical architecture. And then comes Aristotle, who's Plato's student, and very different. Where Plato looks upwards, Aristotle looks outwards. Biology, logic, ethics, politics. He wants structure, clarity. He wants to classify things. And Aristotle gives us formal logic. Premise, conclusion. If A is true and B is true, then C follows. He articulates what we now call the law of non-contradiction. Something cannot both be and not be at the same time in the same respect. This idea has shaped science, law, debate, education. It literally has shaped how the Western world argues. But here's the weird part, because logic requires clean categories, true or false, either or. And when we forget that clarity that Socrates was trying to put underneath of all of this structure, those tools get rigid. Aristotle didn't invent black and white thinking. He invented disciplined reasoning. But that disciplined reasoning, when stripped of humility, becomes that rigid certainty. The structure of argument becomes more important than the search for truth. Winning becomes more important than examining. And that's not Aristotle's fault. It wasn't what he was intending to do. It's what happens when tools outlive their means. Centuries later, René Descartes turned doubt inward. And I'm about to butcher some French. I'm so sorry. But in 1637, he writes, Je pense donc Jésus. I think, therefore I am. I have no idea if I even just spoke French. I'm not going to lie. But later in Latin, which I will also pronounce confidently and probably incorrectly, cogito ergo sum, sometimes expanded, dubito ergo cogito ergo sum, meaning I doubt, therefore I think. That almost sounded Japanese. I doubt, therefore I think, and therefore I am. Descartes wasn't celebrating certainty. He was stripping everything away. What if everything I believe is wrong? The one thing he couldn't doubt was that something was doing the doubting. Existence revealed through uncertainty. Doubt as the actual foundation. And then Immanuel Kant suggests the limits of knowledge may be built into the structure of the human mind itself. Humility is not optional. It's structural. And if you think this is just ancient philosophy, it really isn't. This whole idea of Socratic methods and Socratic thinking is still alive in every serious field of inquiry. We call it Socratic questioning. In science today, no hypothesis is ever treated as final truth. Scientists design experiments specifically to try to prove themselves wrong. Peer review exists to challenge assumptions. Even the most established theories, gravity, evolution, quantum mechanics, are held provisionally, ready to be revised when better evidence appears. That willingness to be proven wrong it's not weakness, it's the engine of progress. The scientific method is structured humility in action. Doubt first, test rigorously, stay open to being corrected at any time. Even in therapy, in the world of therapy, especially cognitive approaches, the same spirit shows up as Socratic questioning. Instead of a therapist telling someone what to believe, we ask really open questions just out of curiosity. Like, what evidence do you have that supports that thought? How might someone else see this situation differently? What would happen if this belief turned out not to be true, or at least not completely true? Are you? Are you really that? Or is it really that way? And a really good therapist will even ask for evidence to support those ideas, to make sure it is reality, not just feelings, that is creating their perspective. The point is not to win an argument, not to prove a client wrong. It's simply to help them step back and examine their own certainty with fresh eyes. Because very often, people discover that the story they were so sure of is actually way more narrow than they realized, built 100% on assumptions they hadn't tested at all. And this form of therapy doesn't claim superior knowledge. They walk along the client with the same posture that Socrates took. Let's look at this together. Let's see what holds up, what's true. That same quiet invitation, let's examine instead of I know, still runs through laboratories, courtrooms, classrooms, and clinics. Thinking about thinking. The tools are still here. The real question is whether we still carry the humility that gave birth to them. But this posture did not begin in Greece. This whole idea is not just Greek. Socrates lived in the 5th century BCE. Yet in India, the Upanishadic traditions reach back centuries earlier, around 800 BC and beyond. There you will find the phrase, neti neti, not this, not that, a refusal to trap ultimate reality in a definition. Around the same era, oh gosh, I'm going to butcher this one too, I'm so sorry. Gautama Buddha, that's awful. I'm so sorry. We'll just say Buddha. And around the same era, Buddha often remained silent when pressed on certain metaphysical questions, because clinging to rigid views can become another form of suffering. And in China, again, I'm sorry, Laozi writes, he who speaks does not know. Not anti-knowledge, anti-arrogance. Confucius emphasizes moral refinement through self-examination across continents, across centuries, the same quiet insight emerges time and time again. Wisdom, it seems, begins where certainty softens. Not a Western invitation, a human discovery. 900 years ago, when the first European universities were taking shape, higher education carried that thread forward. Access was limited, often reserved for the wealthy and the privileged, but the purpose of education was striking. Students were trained first in the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric. Not what to think, how to think. Even the degree names that we use today reflect this heritage. A bachelor entered foundational study, a master achieved deeper command, and a PhD, philosophi doctor, literally means teacher of the love of wisdom. From the Greek philo, love, and Sophia, wisdom. Love of wisdom, not love of certainty. This is education at its best, and it was intellectual formation, thinking about thinking, and I'm still learning this myself. So here's this weird part. With people across centuries thinking about thinking, have we kept up that tradition? In a world that seems to calcify into 100% black and white thinking, us versus them, I'm right, you're wrong, have we preserved the humility of the wisest among us? Or are they, I don't know, sitting on a back burner of some Twitter post? When you feel right, that's a feeling, right? Or is that a fact? Can you actually tell the difference? History has always been shaped by perspective. And for a really long time, it was written largely by victors. Recently, we've worked really hard as a people to recover overlooked voices, and both matter, both are valid. But neither is the entire picture, because any single vantage point is partial. And partial narratives, when presented as complete facts, become distortions. The question isn't whose story we tell or who's right. It's whether we tell it with enough humility to admit that we don't see the whole picture. And something else strikes me here. Many of these thinkers lived in deeply religious worlds. Some were explicitly people of faith. Others were shaped by spiritual traditions. But notice what unites them. Their faith or their metaphysics. And neither one of those eliminated humility. It actually seemed to deepen it somehow. Because at its best, religious wisdom doesn't harden into certainty. It softens into reverence. Reverence for mystery. A reverence for limits. Reverence for what exceeds human comprehension. And maybe that's not different from educational wisdom at all. Maybe the deepest learning, whether in a university or a monastery, begins in the same way. But that admission, I do not fully understand. So maybe the idea is simple. When we feel really certain about something, maybe we should pause. Not because we're definitely wrong, or not because we're wrong at all. Because certainty can be a signal. A signal that something complex has been way oversimplified. That the nuance of the situation may have been lost. Most meaningful issues are really layered. We see this every day in counseling and basically everywhere, really. And the moment we reduce those nuanced issues to right or wrong, all or nothing, man, we lose all of the middle ground, and we lose way more of it than we realize. It not necessarily abandoning truth, but losing perspective. The traditions we've explored weren't obsessed with certainty. They were disciplined about examination. So the next time you're in an argument and we feel absolutely sure about something, we should ask ourselves, what nuance am I missing? What's the assumption that I'm using underneath of this thought? Am I responding from evidence or from repetition, or I heard it enough? Not to weaken conviction, but to refine it. Because conviction refined by humility is really steady. It's solid, right? You can really think logically like that. But certainty without any examination is really fragile. And it makes people combative about trying to challenge anyone who says anything other than what they're thinking. Right? It's this weird point of weakness that makes us angry when we're questioned. So I asked you this. What might we be missing? And how could I be a little bit more Socratic about this? Where are my limitations? What do I not understand and not know? And why is that important? But that's where I sit with this thought for now. Thanks for thinking this through with me. The Thoughtful Therapist. So if you guys are enjoying this content and like these videos, please like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this conversation on philosophy more or less than previous conversations, let me know in the comments and I'll try to start tailoring some of my content towards that. Thank you. I want to give a quick shout out to my first sponsor, Synergy Health Group. If you live in the state of Florida, Synergy Health Group, they do virtual counseling. They also have the counseling center in Highlands County, Florida. They also have virtual centers in Ocala and in Miami, the Miami-Dade area. So if you or someone you know could really use someone to talk to, I'm telling you, there's nothing quite like a trained professional. They can help.